With all the low totals this week, we'll help you wade through the muck of a Week 15. Some teams are starting to phone it in a little bit because their season's over, but we'll tell you who you can trust on some of those teams. We'll also tell you who to play from the high-scoring Patriots-Steelers game. This is the Footballguys Daily Fantasy Power Grid. I am Austin Lee, joined by John Lee, Ryan Hester, and Devin Knotts in his favorite jersey this week. I like that.
Big boys don't wear small numbers. Joe Thomas, represent, boys.
I love it. And during the next hour, we're going to help you out with the main slate for Week 15, FanDuel, and DraftKings. We're going to go to Vegas first and talk to John about what he's seeing with those spreads. They're low this week, and the high games are off the main slate.
Yeah, I mean, the big boys don't wear small numbers. Speaking of small numbers, we're in Vegas this week. There's nothing to like. I was complaining, I think, on the episode with David Dodds earlier this year that I wasn't getting paid enough to put together the Vegas value chart because there were so many high-scoring teams. I think I might owe him a refund on what I'm getting paid this week because there's nothing really to like at Vegas this week. There's one single game on the main slate. Of course, we have a Thursday night game. We have a couple Saturday games, a Monday game. And so I think we're down because of that to about 12 games total. And of those 12 games, one single game surpasses 50 points. Just working off memory, I think it's the first time all year that's happened. And as Austin pointed out, that's the Pittsburgh-New England game. There's a lot of goodness to like in that game. We'll definitely cover that today. New England is a short favorite, a road favorite, mind you, 2.5 points. Game totals 52 points. And then we have a slew, just looking down my list here, a slew of home favorites, starting with Baltimore, Atlanta, Minnesota, Chicago, Indianapolis, and so forth. But there's only 8 teams total projected above 24 points. So it's going to be a really interesting week this week in terms of who you're selecting for your cash games in particular. And I think tournaments, particularly on a weekend where there's some championships, DraftKings and FanDuel, we're looking at you. It's going to be a really interesting week for tournaments. So definitely buckle in and kind of get set because we've got a lot of things to talk about. There's a lot of uncertainty with some of these game totals. It's not a clear-cut week, and it's one of the reasons you should definitely tune in for the entire episode.
It's one of my favorite kind of weeks to play. A little bit of uncertainty, a little bit of uncomfortable, situations. This should be fun. Let's talk about some quarterbacks. Devin, I'll pitch it to you first to, tell us who you think are the cash game and GPP plays at quarterback this week.
Yeah, this week's pretty easy. So for cash, I think it's pretty straightforward. It's Tom Brady. It's December. It's getting colder. It's Tom Brady season. So 334 yards in his last 2 games. Gronkowski's getting healthier, and we saw that last week. And he's been historically pretty good against Pittsburgh in what typically has been higher scoring games, and it's projected to be the highest scoring game this week. On DraftKings, he's 5,900, which is the 7th highest quarterback. I mean, he's the same price as Lamar Jackson, and there's really no reason for it. And Pittsburgh was really good weeks 6 through 12, but a lot of that was related to weak schedules. So over the last 2 games, they have struggled, including against the Raiders last week. They're averaging 310 yards allowed over the last 2 games. So I think this is a really good week for Brady and crew and what should be a shootout. I'll let Ryan talk about the other quarterback on the other side of the ball, but I think he's too expensive. 2 GPP plays. So favorite of the week is Kirk Cousins. So Xavier Howard is out for Miami, and Tom Brady basically did whatever he wanted against this Miami secondary. He had 358 yards and 3 touchdowns. We even saw Josh Allen the week before that with 231 and 2. And then Andrew Luck the week before that with 343 and 3. So I don't know. The reason I don't like it in cash is primarily, and we'll get into running backs in a minute, but the firing of John DeFilippo worries me a little bit as far as Cousins' volume, and his price isn't particularly cheap. So he's more of a GPP play. And then the last guy, I'm saving a couple guys, and I'll jump back in if they're not mentioned. But Derek Carr. So going up against the Bengals defense that we've talked about all season, how horrendous it is. Carr looked better. I mean, he's thrown 510 yards in his last last 2 games. And, I mean, he's a guy who could have a big game. I'm sorry, 610 yards, not 510. That wouldn't be very good. The Bengals have allowed the 4th most passing yards per game, and we know that Hugh Jackson is running the ship there. So it's not a particularly good defense.
I feel like this Oakland at Cincinnati game could have like sneaky shootout weirdness, or it could just completely collapse and be an awful game.
Yeah, it's very bipolar in the sense that it's either 35-31 or 14-10.
Right. There's a very broad range of outcomes for that game. Lots of potential GPP stuff there, maybe. Ryan, let's talk about quarterbacks. Any interest in Ben Roethlisberger on the other side of that high-scoring game, or do you agree with the Tom Brady cash game play?
Yeah, it's Brady there. I know I pounded the drum for Roethlisberger last week. I still think had he not been hurt and then not properly reinserted into the game early enough, it would have been an okay play, but we'll move past that as I'm trying to do. But no, Brady was the first guy I wrote down, and then we're going to talk later about maybe I guess we can kind of call it a lack of value on the slate. And so if you did want to save a little bit at quarterback, the one guy that I'm looking to go down to is Jeff Driscoll, the 5,100. So DraftKings price, he's even more priced friendlier, I should say, at FanDuel at 6,400. Relative to the rest of the quarterback field. So Driscoll's another guy. Again, you talked about how that game could be, it could go either way, right? But Oakland, there's a little narrative to it. They just expended a lot of effort beating a team that is far superior to them in terms of talent. They did so at home. Now they have to fly across country. The Bengals showed a lot of effort last week. Driscoll should have had an even better day than he did. He had a rushing touchdown that looked to be a touchdown called back. So he's a guy I like on the cheap end, but it's really Brady and him are.
And Mark Davis doesn't like Hugh Jackson.
So even more narrative for you too. And
can I throw 2 stats out for Driscoll?
Go.
So the Bengals are last in sack percentage, which is 2% of sacks, or 2% of the time they get a sack. They've allowed 2 touchdowns to 12 out of the 13 quarterbacks they've faced, and they're allowing 8.4 yards per attempt, which is a league high. So, it's a very good matchup.
And that was the Raiders, you said.
The Raiders.
Raiders defense.
Yeah, sorry.
Yep. Nope. That makes sense.
John, what do you think about quarterbacks?
I guess it's okay to start off the show being unanimous and say that I think that Tom Brady is the cash game quarterback.
First
that
time
is
in
not
the history
okay
of this show.
Yeah, the show is going to implode. I don't know what's going to happen here.
Yeah, so I mean, he's the guy. This game looks like it's it's got the shootout potential on that main slate. 5,900. He's I think somebody's already pointed out. December is when the Patriots start to come around, and we're starting to see it. They're 100% healthy for the first time all season. We were missing Edelman early. Berkman's been out. These guys are both back. Burkhead, yes. My apologies. Please at me on Twitter @TipandPick. Give me some help.
He doesn't watch football.
I don't watch at all. And Gordon coming in mid-season. It's just everything coming around. While you're busting chops, Devin, I want you to think about. We've talked nothing about FanDuel, and you're the FanDuel guy on the squad. So start thinking about some FanDuel quarterbacks for these guys. So he's the guy. Brady's the guy. And if for whatever reason, maybe you hate Tom Brady, maybe you're in love with Gisele Bündchen and she left you for him. I don't know. Cash game quarterback. The only other option I have on my list is Dak Prescott against Indianapolis at 5,500. He's the only other option from my perspective. For GPPs, I talked about it on my tips and picks video this week. I just believe that talent out trumps everything else. And Aaron Rodgers against Chicago. I know Chicago's got a great defense. I get it. They do. But last week, Mike McCarthy's gone. And lo and behold, the Packers score more points than they have all season, 34 points against the Falcons, a much worse defense, no doubt. But I do believe that Aaron Rodgers, of all the quarterbacks in the league, has the capacity to pick apart this Bears defense. He's 5,700. He's cheaper than quite a few of the quarterbacks on the slate. And our Steve Buzzard, I looked at his ownership projections, early week ownership projections, 2%. Aaron Rodgers at 2%, guys. You don't get that very often. He's a guy that I'm looking at for tournament play. I'll give you one more. And then
Bryce Callahan's also out, the slot corner, who's been probably the best slot corner in football this year.
And Randall Cobb looked like he might finally be 100% last week. So that just adds to the allure. A big millionaire maker flyer, Josh Rosen against Atlanta, 4,700. I knew this was going to
The
happen.
Red Black Eye Joes come up
There's
from both Devin and Ryan.
There's a quarterback at 48 that's a better play. But
There's a better Josh than that you can play.
Josh Rosen's terrible. You cannot win it.
Well, I'm gonna finish my thought.
Please.
Atlanta. How good is Atlanta? How good is Atlanta's defense?
Awful.
Not great.
Yeah, we have a resident Falcons fan on the panel. I mean, how good are they?
They held Aaron Rodgers to 196 yards last week and Drew Brees 2 weeks ago to 171.
That's because those guys didn't need to throw.
I understand, but
they weren't 10-point underdogs, right?
I get it.
Okay, so that's where it's coming from. You can have Josh Rosen and a future Hall of Famer and Larry Fitzgerald for 9,400 this week and do whatever you want elsewhere. It's not a bad play. I'm not going to listen to you with your red black-eyed Joes. Don't do it in the $500 queue or something like that only has 100 entries. No, that's not where you do it. But in the Millionaire Maker, you absolutely can roll with that and feel like you have a shot.
I'm going to steal John's line and just say, you're wrong. Nick Mullins is the guy if you want a guy under 5K. He threw for 414 yards against Seattle the last time they played, and Seattle's given up 300 yards or more in 5 of their last 9 games. So Mullins threw for 48 times last time. I think he's a guy that his price really hasn't reflected that enough. I just don't see their upside in Rosen.
And weren't they talking about pulling Mullins in the last game? I mean, before last week was played against Denver. Now, they won that game, but I was reading that Shanahan was thinking about pulling him midway through the game if he didn't perform. Now,
is that because Beathard's back?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, not because Beathard's better, but just because I think he had thrown, I'm shooting from the hip here, 3 or 4 interceptions in the previous 2 games.
Yeah.
Taking too long on guys people aren't going to play.
Yeah.
I like Mullins. I'm going to play some of him.
Okay.
All right. In GPPs, obviously.
Don't play Josh Allen. I know he's going to be popular this week, but let's hold off until next week. So, and the reason I say that is Detroit's allowed the fewest rushing yards to quarterbacks this season. They allowed 18 yards to Mitchell Trubisky, 15 yards to Russell Wilson, and 2 yards to Cam Newton rushing. Those are maybe the 3 best rushing quarterbacks in the NFL. And they're a big reason, kind of narrative-y, but their pass defense is so bad that, quarterbacks don't really have to scramble on them. So I think he's going to get a lot more play than what he should. Next week when he busts this week is the time to play him against New England.
Right on. Let's move along to running backs. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And when you subscribe, click that little bell next to the subscribe button so that you get announcements, reminders when we post new videos. We'd much appreciate it. Thank you for listening and subscribing. Running backs, there's talk that James Conner's trying to come back this week. I don't buy that. He didn't practice Thursday. I don't think that's going to happen. So, obviously keep up with the injury reports, but I think it's still Jalen Samuels this week. Matt Breida got in a limited practice on Thursday, so he may be playing this week. And then that's about it that I kind of care about. John, let's go to you first for running backs. Who do you like this week?
Can I say not a lot?
Yeah.
I don't. I mean, I think the cream of the crop is Joe Mixon at 6,100 against Oakland. Come on, let's bring him up, fellas. Let's bring him up. Bring him up.
Yeah.
I like him. He's just not the cream of the crop.
Oh, he's the cream of the crop this week. He's without question the best cash game running back on the slate. Coming off a week that saw him touch the ball 31 times for 140 yards against the Chargers. Now he gets to go up against the 27th DVOA rush defense. This is a perfect spot for him as a 3-point home favorite. I think he's the guy that you got to have at 6,100.
And let me qualify that. He's a DraftKings specific play because the pricing is
too expensive.
Out of whack between FanDuel and DraftKings on him.
He's the 5th highest running back on FanDuel at 7,800.
Yeah.
I can get behind that. I think
what?
No, I'm saying I can get behind the point you're making.
All right, we're good.
What you need to do is focus in what I get. I gave you a task 5 minutes ago, and we still haven't gotten it. Then that's a cash game quarterback for FanDuel.
I already said Brady for both. It's Brady for both. All right.
Okay.
So Joe Mixon's the guy, and then beyond that, I'm lukewarm on the following cash game running backs. I can tell you, I ended up with at least as of Thursday, Tevin Coleman against Arizona at home, 4,200. There's a little apprehension there about how much Ito Smith has gotten as of late, but I think a lot of that has to have dealt with losing game scripts. That they've lost 4 in a row, and Ito tends to get in there in passing game situations. So Coleman, though, I think at 4,200 as a 9-point or 9.5-point home favorite, I like him. And then I don't know. I'll pass it over to Ryan. What do you think of? I mean, he's on my cash game list, but what about Samuels against New England, 5,200? He's on my cash game list. I think he's probably viable because of the involvement we saw last week in the passing game. But there's, my feeling is that this isn't a week where you're going to feel great about your cash game lineup simply because of the quantity of games and the quality of players within those games.
Yeah.
No, but Samuels has to be on the list, assuming Connor's out. And Dr. Gene has maintained ever since Connor's injury that he probably wouldn't be back until next week at the earliest. I'm going with that. It's just in that 5,200 DraftKings, 5,500 FanDuel price range, you're not going to have a guy on an offense projected to score this many points who might touch the ball as often as Samuels does. I mean, last week he dominated the backfield snaps 48-8, carries 11-5, targets 7-0. Stephen Ridley scored a short touchdown, but Samuels had a carry from the 2-yard line as well. He just didn't get in. So, I mean, it's not as though there's no goal line usage there. And, FanDuel relative to the rest of the running back field, his price is great. But DraftKings scoring system, he's a good play too because of the full PPR. So I think on both sides he needs to be on your list. Again, just due to the situation. The Mixon thing, I agree with you, John. The price is so good, but man, it's just so hard to get behind these teams that don't know what they're really playing for. So I'm with you on Mixon, but I'm trying, and I guess I'll ask you guys. It just seems like every week has been the right thing to do has been to get at least one, if not two, of these, uber stud running backs into the lineup, right? And I know we're missing a couple of them off the slate, but we've got, I guess, Saquon Barkley and Ezekiel Elliott on this slate. Are you trying hard to get one? Can you even get both into your lineup? We know the matchups aren't great, but these guys are touching the ball, upwards of 30 times a game, 40 for Elliott last week. Elliott has 28% of all Dallas's targets in the passing game over the last 5 weeks, which is really appealing. I mean, what are you guys doing? I guess, Devin, we can pass you the mic, but what are you doing with these high-end guys? Because these are the guys that are kind of flipping slates here of late.
You're right. The matchups aren't great. But I think I am playing Ezekiel Elliott over Barkley this week. Barkley's had some pretty favorable matchups the last couple of weeks, and I don't know. Barkley probably has the higher ceiling. I don't think there's any disputing that based on his pass catching ability as well as, just his overall big play ability. But Elliott has a significantly higher floor. And if I'm paying up this week, both in tough matchups, Barkley's pace is not really sustainable as far as what he's on. So I'm going Elliott. But, I'd love to hear if you guys are going Barkley.
I'll go Barkley if ODB, OBJ, Odell Beckham, whatever you call him. If he's inactive, I'll go with Barkley because I know that he's going to catch 8 passes.
Sure.
Beyond that, I can't go with Barkley this week in cash. Tennessee's been really good against the run this season. They've allowed one 100-yard rusher all season, and they really haven't allowed a lot of passes to be caught out of the backfield. So if you're going to go with one of these guys, it's probably Zeke. I'm talking about cash here. It's probably Zeke. But if Beckham is inactive, and as of Thursday night, it's really we're not really sure because he hasn't practiced, or he had limited practice today. And he's saying he could be going, but he's not quite sure because something ain't right. I believe I'm quoting him almost.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of question there, but I don't know. Neither one of these guys make me excited.
Yeah, Odell Beckham had a limited practice Wednesday and then did not practice Thursday. It wasn't necessarily like a downgrade. It sounded like it was sort of part of the plan, but it's very fuzzy here on a Thursday night. So pay close attention to that one. Any other running backs there, Ryan?
Yeah. I had, John mentioned the Atlanta-Arizona game, but he might have mentioned the wrong team because I think David Johnson is a great
Come on.
He's on my list.
I can't tell when Devin says "come on" if he's going to disagree or agree.
You guys mention him every single week.
But
now that's Julio Jones we mention every week.
That's true. and Austin, you mentioned Power Grid Bingo with me and Julio Jones. It's been almost a month since I've mentioned Atlanta against pass catching running backs. They're actually no longer the champ. They're second now because they allow 7.1 receptions per game, and Indy allows 7.2 to running back. So
Progress.
Guess who had 8 last week?
David Johnson had 8 catches on 10 targets. Granted, it was for 0 yards roughly, but against Atlanta, they allow running backs to catch passes and they allow them to get yardage afterwards. So, the guy still is playing over 90% of the snaps. He's still an electric player.
In cash?
You should stack Josh Rosen and David Johnson just to piss off Devin.
I actually do have him on my GPP list, so thank you.
All right, fine.
For clarifying.
Fine, I can get behind him in GPPs. There's no way I'm touching him in cash.
And no one is stacking what John stacked. Ignore him.
Yeah, I'm skipping that. We're just going. I'm going right past that. But no, Johnson was on my list, and then another guy on my list, despite his declining snap rate over the last 6 weeks, is actually James White. From New England. If history is any indicator, New England might run the ball, 15 times in this game. They're going to spread Pittsburgh out. They're going to throw to people on the interior. It's going to be short A-dot type of plays, and that speaks to a James White game. Although I did mention, his snap rate has gone down in 6 straight games. He's now playing under 40% of the snaps as of last week. But I think there's a chance to uptick that based on game flow. And again, that's GPP only, though.
Why him over Burkhead, just out of curiosity?
I think he's better at that role.
Okay. They had similar snap counts and touches last week, and Burkhead comes at a 50% discount. I'm just curious if you had I won't say a better take, but a stronger take.
A better take. That's okay. You can say my take was bad by implying it. No, but I think White's a little bit better in that role. I think they do use Burkhead in versatile situations, but I don't think they're even going to necessarily need to hide the fact that they're just going to come spread it out and throw. And
White's getting double the snaps of Burkhead in the past couple of games and more than double the targets too. So I think that if you're going to pick one, I think White's your guy. Let's go to wide receivers.
No.
Oh, yeah, you got one last one?
I haven't went yet.
He has at least 3.
Leonard Fournette.
Yeah, John objects to you going.
Leonard Fournette is my favorite GPP play this week.
Fournette is? Fournette.
So this Washington team, the defensive line was good early on with Jonathan Allen and Matt Ioannidis. I can't pronounce names now. It's rubbing off on me. And Deron Payne, the rookie. This is a unit that was pretty good, but they're hitting a rookie wall, not a rookie wall, but an inexperienced wall, and late in the season. Over the last 6 games, they've allowed 5.3 yards per carry, which is the highest in the NFL. The Giants ran for 229. The Eagles ran for 139. Dallas ran for 128. Houston 132, and Atlanta 148. So this is a unit that, and we've seen Jacksonville, it's very isolated as far as who's going to get the carries on a week-to-week basis. This is a perfect spot for Fournette to come back. I think a lot of people have written him off. He was suspended 2 weeks ago. He struggled last week. I think this is the perfect time for I don't know what his ownership is, John, if you have it up, but it's a perfect spot for him. And then, go ahead.
12% on FanDuel.
Fournette, 13%.
Yeah,
13 on DraftKings.
I think he'll come under that. And then the other guy I have is in cash, Dalvin Cook. So the problem with Cook has always been the amount of touches, but he's had 17 and 18 over the last 2 games. There's a lot of speculation that Mike Zimmer fired John DeFilippo because he wanted to run the ball more, and they weren't giving Cook the amount of touches that he needed. I think this is a potential game where against Miami, who's allowing 139 yards a game, Kiko Alonso and Raekwon McMillan are terrible at the linebacker position. So this is a potential game where Dalvin Cook could have a monster game, as well as his price really hasn't gone up that much because he really hasn't seen the ball all that much. And I do like the Samuels call. Joe Mixon, I'm fine with on DraftKings. There's no way I'm touching him on FanDuel. And then one question for you guys. What are we doing with Chris Carson if Rashad Penny misses?
I have him on my GPP list already. I just felt like I had talked too much, so I didn't bring him up.
If Penny misses, I mean, he should see 22 carries.
I may like him even if Penny doesn't miss. I mean, if Penny didn't do much on Monday, Carson had 22 out of the 33 team carries on Monday night. 6,300
on FanDuel and 5,600 on DraftKings is pretty
under
cheap.
4% ownership right now, and I think that would rise if Penny's out. So you could almost argue it might be a better GPP play. It might be lower rostered if Penny's in, and he'd only sacrifice a handful of touches in the game.
And one more, Doug Martin against the Bengals.
It's going to be very interesting to see who comes out with the fantasy points in this Oakland-Cincinnati game. Because
two worst defenses match up against each other, right?
Right, exactly. So it seems good, but then you feel a little icky playing some of these offensive players too.
Yeah, that's the issue, right? None of the offenses. The defenses are bad, but the offenses are arguably worse.
It might be that way. Yeah.
So that's the issue. And I'll get behind the Dalvin Cook call. I do like it. I'm not so sure about cash. It's borderline, but I do love it. It's one of the guys that's on my GPP list, so I do like it. Nice.
Let's talk about wide receivers. For the rest of our content for the week, be sure to check out footballguys.com. We mentioned earlier we're keeping an eye on Odell Beckham Jr. He's got a quad injury. Doug Baldwin got in a limited practice today on Thursday. We're keeping an eye on him as well. T.Y. Hilton has not practiced Wednesday or Thursday. Doesn't necessarily mean he's not going to play, but keep an eye on that one. And then there's a couple other kind of smaller receivers here. Josh Doxson looks like he may not go, and Bruce Ellington looks unlikely to play. Ryan, let's go to you first for wide receivers. Who you like?
Yeah, so there's one on each site that kind of jumps out at me, and more so on DraftKings. It is T.Y. Hilton, actually. So, again, disclaimer, be prepared. Look at his injury status Friday. Last week we had the same conversation, though. He didn't practice Thursday. I liked him then. He had a great game. I like him again. So, again, check out if he's limited Friday. All systems are go. I think they're just giving him some rest. But Hilton's 7th in PPR points since week 10. He's 8th in targets per game. He's 12th in target market share. So he's seeing over a quarter of Indy's targets. He's seeing 10.2 targets a game on a team that throws with a quarterback that's quite good. So the volume's great, and he's just wildly underpriced on DraftKings at 6,800. And then FanDuel, the one that kind of jumped up is JuJu Smith-Schuster. So I know I kind of dismissed Ben Roethlisberger's prospects earlier. That was more due to his price. Smith-Schuster's seeing almost Antonio Brown-like volume this year, not Antonio Brown of past years, but this year they're seeing very similar volume. And New England's the third friendliest team in our normalized strength of schedule against wide receivers over the last 5 weeks. So it's a game that, again, we hit on it. It's going to be high scoring. I'll take kind of the cheaper of the two in a very closely concentrated target distribution there in Pittsburgh. So those are the two sort of high-end guys I'm starting with, one on each site, although I don't mind Smith-Schuster on either side. I think Hilton.
Can I add something about Juju?
Yeah, please.
New England struggled against speed, so they've allowed 135 to Kenny Stills last week, Juju is, would we say he's significantly faster than Antonio Brown? I think that's kind of safe to say at this point. They allowed 142 and 3 touchdowns to Tyreek Hill. Marquez Valdes-Scantling had 101 yards on 3 catches, and Keelan Cole had some deep throws as well. So they've allowed 5 receivers to go over 100 yards. I think Juju's the guy this week over Antonio Brown.
Any other guys there, Ryan?
One GPP shot that I want to throw in here. Julian Edelman. So again, I'm harping on the New England passing against the Steelers. If New England throws, 10 balls outside the numbers this week, I'll be shocked. The Steelers, we saw 2 weeks ago on 19 targets, gave up a massive game on Sunday night to Keenan Allen, did all of his work inside. As a Steeler fan, if I see J.J. Watt or one of his fellow linebackers covering an elite slot receiver, again, I'm going to throw something. It happens way too often. That's part of their scheme. They're getting crushed inside. This also applies to another New England player that we may talk about in the next section as well. Julian Edelman is the wide receiver that I like. And again, just looking at Buzzard has him at 10% and change, so I like that a lot. And his price on FanDuel is a little bit better relative to DraftKings. He's 7,200 on both sites, so that probably makes him a little bit better at FanDuel, even though the scoring system isn't as friendly for his style of play there.
26 catches to opposing slot receivers over the last 3 games for Pittsburgh.
It's a lot.
Nice. Devin, keep us rolling on wide receivers.
Yeah, Amari Cooper's way too cheap on FanDuel at 6,800. It's almost a must play at that price. I'm
showing him as 6,600 on FanDuel.
Sorry, my screen is the 6 is looking grounded like an 8.
Yeah, so that's even better.
The
matchup isn't even all that good, but at that price, it is.
Yeah, the matchup isn't great, but why not? I mean, this week's hard. It's I think one of these Atlanta receivers as a GPP play is it's probably Calvin Ridley. So Patrick Peterson is going to draw Julio for most of the game, but I mean, how is Atlanta going to move the ball as a 10-point favorite? I know John mentioned Tevin Coleman. Not sure I can get 100% behind that, but
Austin Hooper's hurt, so they may not have that option.
Yeah, I like both Sanu and Ridley as GPP plays. You guys are going to crush me for this one, but I already mentioned Derek Carr. What about Jordy Nelson?
You're right.
John's just going to keep holding up that red black eye Joe on this one.
Keep talking. Go ahead.
How many 48-year-old receivers can we mention tonight?
No, hold on.
I mean,
Hold on. 18 targets over his last 2 weeks. He's $5,000 on FanDuel. I mean, we talk about not liking anybody, and we talk about potentially going up to Elliott and Barkley. If you're going to do it, to get 9 targets a game against the worst defense in football in the Bengals, you could do worse. I'm not saying in cash, but you could do worse.
What about Zay Jones for $100 more?
I don't hate Zay Jones either. You know this.
There you go.
You know it's a rough week when we're talking about players.
But he's had 16 catches over the last 2 weeks.
I'm having a tough time.
Are we talking about Zay Jones?
No, Jordy.
I'm having a tough time stomaching any Oakland player. And I know that that shouldn't be the case, but it's just like reflex that I just can't get behind any of these. Like, I'd rather pick the Cincinnati side of this game.
Yeah. I know Cincy's terrible on defense, but I can tell a story that Oakland scores under 10 points in this game and just gets blown.
I think there is an Oakland player I can get behind, but like
it's Jared Cook, but
yeah.
I had Cook written down too.
I think it's a fine game stack. I mean, you could go Doug Martin, you could go Joe Mixon, you could go Jordy, Tyler Boyd. I mean, there's a number of different options in this game, but the names behind them just make us all cringe.
Yeah, the matchups are good. I mean, at least you'll know by 1:30 whether you have a chance.
Yeah, what if this game's 35-31, which it very easily could be? I'm not saying in cash, but in a GPP.
You're right.
What odds do we think that this game shoots out? 20%? 30%?
I won't crap on that.
It's higher than that.
Oh, yeah. Then there you go. But there's an equal chance that it's 14-10, like we've mentioned the entire show. Couple more guys. Dante Pettis at 5,500. The guy just looks like he's ready to step into the role. And I mentioned Nick Mullins earlier and what he's been doing as of late. And then one more name I'll throw out there. Why not? But it's I think it's Allen Robinson time, 6,500. on FanDuel is pretty cheap for the top Bears receiver.
All right, John. I think you're last here on the wide receiver train.
I feel like we've been all over the place. Can I get just a recap, if for nobody else, what's your number one cash game receiver?
T.Y. Hilton pending health.
Amari Cooper on FanDuel.
You want us to come back to you on DraftKings?
Yeah.
All right, we'll come back to you. So DraftKings, again, I'm going to talk kind of where I went with running back. It's tough. From my perspective, D.D. Westbrook at 4,500 is attractive against Washington. He should avoid, Josh Norman most of the day. I think in the same game we've been talking about, Tyler Boyd makes a lot of sense at 5,700. The volume that he's getting makes some sense. And then, Bruce Ellington, what's the status on him?
I don't think he's going to play. He did not practice on Thursday. It's sounding like he's not going to go.
Right. So if he doesn't play, I mean, how does Detroit move the ball on Sunday? I mean, it could be a less than stellar matchup with Tre'Davious White shadow coverage, because Tre'Davious White's no joke. He's probably one of the more underrated cornerbacks in the league. But if they throw the ball, it's almost got to go to Galladay. He's 5,400. And I think just by volume alone, forget anything else, I think by volume alone, his floor is pretty solid at 5,400 on DraftKings. So those are the guys I'm looking at for cash games. Devin, are you ready to give me your cash game guy?
Yeah, cash game. I think I'm going Tyler Boyd at 57.
Okay. So there's a couple of us on that guy. In terms of tournaments, I won't belabor the point. I've got one I'll save for a stack later. But one I don't think I've heard called out yet is if Doug Baldwin is active. I like him this week going against the slot in San Francisco. That's a position that's done well this year. Doug Baldwin, recency bias. He hasn't done anything for a while. I think he's been. I think most of us believe he's been playing injured, and this week may be no different. But on the week where I think just about anything can happen, I'm happy to roll with him at about $5,000. I think he's 5,300 going out of the slots for a team that's, they got an average team total, 24 points, which is about average this week. So no problems with that at the ownership that Buzzard projected earlier.
What about Stephon Diggs?
Sure.
Going up against Miami, I think they allowed 96 yards to Josh Gordon last week, 2 touchdowns to Zay Jones the week before, 125 yards to T.Y. Hilton the week before that. So, and then 2 touchdowns to Devontae Adams. So the trend is there for one of these Vikings receivers. Is it weird to say I trust Diggs more than Thielen at this point?
That is weird.
Yes.
After Thielen's first 6 games where he went over 100 yards, but has he done it since? I don't think he has.
He's been a little off the mark the past few games, for sure.
Yeah, I don't know if he's not healthy or what the story is, but
3 games ago he had 125.
All right.
Well, I'm seeing a lot about how teams are scheming him out, especially how New England did it.
And he's not the type of receiver that can overcome double cover. If you double or triple coverage him, he's not going to overcome that.
I think that's part of why a couple years ago they moved him into the slot and moved Diggs outside. It's easier to get easier coverage and less coverage out of the slot.
I agree. But this week, the matchup, you stealing a little bit of my thunder here from Stacks. Adam Thielen.
Save it, John. You got to get it out.
One of my guys. No, that's not the one I was thinking about, but he is one of my guys this week, and he's got a nice matchup against Bobby McCain, who's one of the bottom-ranked coverage cornerbacks, Pro Football Focus, 97th out of 120. He's just not doing anything right this season, and this is a good spot for Adam Thielen to get right, I think.
Yeah. Diggs goes up against Torrey McTyer, who's Xavier Howard's replacement, who hasn't been good either. So I think they're both in great spots.
Let's move on to tight ends. If you agree or disagree with our picks, be sure to use the YouTube comments down below to either scream at Devin or be sure to give kudos to the rest of us.
Can we not say CJ Uzomah and move on?
Please don't say CJ Uzomah.
So Austin Hooper missed practice on Thursday.
He's on John's list.
He was going to.
I was looking for him on my list, but he's not there.
If there's a week to ever play CJ Uzomah, it's this week because Oakland is probably the worst team against tight ends. But I think
But we're not going to mention him, is what you're saying.
We're never playing CJ Uzomah.
Awesome. Jordan Reed did not practice Thursday. I don't think he's going to play this week either. Devin, we'll start with you on tight ends.
Jared Cook.
Yeah, it sounded like John liked him earlier.
I like Derek Carr. I like Oakland. I going up against Hugh Jackson. I mean, like I said last week, 32nd ranked coach. So let's roll with Jared Cook. I'll let someone else talk about Eric Ebron because I'm sure he'll be popular, as well as Rob Gronkowski. But for me, it's Jared Cook and cash. I'm just locking it in. I'm going to the GPP play. If Beckham doesn't play, I'm going back to Evan Ingram, going up against Tennessee. We saw what we saw last week where he's fast, right? And that's what you're really hoping on is him to catch a long pass. I think he had 68 yards or something last week on 3 or 4 catches. So he's a big play type guy, which if I'm playing a GPP at 5,200 on FanDuel is really cheap. So he's the guy I'm looking at. He is a little too pricey on DraftKings at 4,100, but on FanDuel, he's too cheap.
I think Cook is the only Raider that I trust this week, especially for cash. John, you would like to Cook as well. Who else is on your tight end list?
For cash games, I'm looking at Ebron against Dallas, 5,900. I think he's a guy that, they're just using him like crazy. And if there is anything wrong with T.Y. Hilton, I think you just lock and load him. Now in tournament play, it's 21%. This is a highly volatile position. I think you get away from him in tournaments this week. I think it's safe to do in a game where, the Cowboys got a little out of their element last week. At the end, it paid off for them. They won the game and hopefully locked up the division as a Dallas fan. But they don't like to throw the ball as much as they did last week. And I think they like to slow the ball down, and really play time of possession. And that could limit Ebron's upside. We've got him at 21%, which is by far the number one tight end in GPPs.
Do you think that's right?
Do I think that's right?
Doesn't it seem Gronkowski should be like the top owned guy?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Ebron has been a model of efficiency this year. I think I read he's got 11 or 12 touchdowns in one season in 13 games.
Yeah.
And that is more than what he had in 4 seasons with Detroit. It's a pretty remarkable statistic if you think about it, considering he started most of those games with Detroit as well.
I get it. I just think that a lot of people are going to look at Gronkowski's price, especially in the lower dollar tournaments that aren't as experienced, and just plug him and Brady combined together.
I get what you're saying. Do I think that's right? Meaning,
yeah.
I get what you're saying.
You think Gronkowski will end up higher owned than Eric Ebron?
It's probably not interesting to the viewers, but I think a lot of these ownership projections actually come from projections themselves. And I don't have it pulled up here, but I'm going to guess that he's projected higher than 15.7 for Ebron, and Gronkowski's 12.7. That's why. Yeah. A lot of people just enter these things into lineup builders, and it gets spit out, and that's what happens. It's more, it's not as somebody choosing it as it is automated these days.
I guess as someone who builds like 1 or 2 GPP lineups, primarily a cash game play, if there's people like me, I'm putting Rob Gronkowski into my lineup.
And you would be in an advantage for weeks like this. I think that's fair to say. But those MMEs have really changed the way this game is set up and played. Vernon Davis. If Jordan Reed doesn't play against Jacksonville, you're not going to throw against those outside guys. Vernon Davis, 3,200. Good punt play on DraftKings for cash games. I don't know that you need it this week in terms of construction because there's just not a lot to like at the upper end. But he's a guy that if you guys are really trying to roll with the Zeke Elliott and Saquon Barkley, then you're going to have to get some value also.
Not if you play Jordy Nelson.
Well, don't do that. Don't.
You're wrong. He's the same guy that Bruce Ellington was a couple weeks ago. You're hoping for 6 catches, and that's about it.
Be sure to weigh in on the YouTube comments whether you think Jordy Nelson is a viable play this week or not, to help settle this debate between John and Devin.
I mean, really? I mean, I got to go back and look.
18 targets over the last 2 weeks.
He hasn't scored a touchdown since I was in high school. I mean,
and that was a long time ago.
That was a really long time ago. I'm just not going to do it. I'll give you one GPP tight end. I'm actually surprised this guy's name hasn't been mentioned. Maybe I wasn't paying attention, but Vance McDonald, 3,900. They continue to use him. I was looking at his game logs earlier today. I think he's got 3 or more catches in every game but one this season, and he's averaging almost 6 targets per game. And New England's, shout out to my man Austin Lee. Normalized strength of schedule, 28% more fantasy production to the tight end position against league-adjusted defenses, which on the main slate is actually second worst. The only team that's worse is Oakland, who actually faces a young man named CJ Uzomah.
If there's ever a week to use him, it's this week.
All right, that's it. I'm done.
Ryan, bring us home on tight ends.
Yeah, real quick, just to hammer home the Gronkowski point, because I wrote this down. His last 4 games against the Steelers, from most recent to least, 6 catches, 168, no touchdowns, 493, 1 touchdown, 594, 3 touchdowns, 143, 1 touchdown. Even as a rookie that no one knew who he was, when Aaron Hernandez was still there, he scored 3 touchdowns in a game against the Steelers.
It's pretty darn good.
His average weekly tight end finish in 6 games against the Steelers is tight end 2. So he's not the player he once was, but last week he showed flashes, and so I really like the play. I like him. I like Edelman. I think I've already made that kind of clear throughout.
He showed flashes until that last play.
Yeah, well, that was defensively. He's still a good offensive player.
Yeah.
There's 2 more real quick. One, I'm just going to say. The other one, I'm kind of going to ask the other guys. But Jimmy Graham, we have Steve has as under 3% on DraftKings. The matchup is horrible if you look at just normalized strength of schedule, defense versus position. But it tends to be a little more noisy against tight ends than it does at other spots. And he's back to over 70% of the snaps in his last 2 games. And Rodgers is really good at throwing to tight ends. So I'm not going to completely cross him out for GPPs. The other one, do you have any interest in going back to George Kittle?
Yes.
Okay. Because, we saw what he did last week in a half. They're going to keep going to him, right? The target distribution there is getting –
yeah, it's him and Pettis, and that's about it.
That's it, exactly. And Seattle's not what they used to be. So I don't mind Kittle either. His percent roster projection is pretty close to Gronkowski, still below Ebron. Granted, his price is higher, but if you can afford it, I like him there as well.
Can I ask you about Jimmy Graham?
Sure.
The Bears haven't allowed more than 49 yards to a tight end this season, and they haven't allowed a touchdown since week 8. The theory, I'm looking at the list. They haven't played a lot of great tight ends, but
just about to give you that. Name one good tight end they played this season.
Jimmy Graham.
Jimmy Graham in week 1 when Mike McCarthy was at the helm.
The only concern I have is they have him to chip block Khalil Mack or something.
Yeah, it's fair. Even though Graham is cheap, it's not something I'm wanting to do in cash games to save. I think I'd rather do Vernon Davis.
You're hoping for 2 touchdowns.
Yeah. Probably, but he's capable of doing it.
Yeah.
All right, let's breeze through defenses. If you've made it this far into the show, please give us a thumbs up on this video. John, you've got your thumb up. Who do you like on defense?
2 home defenses. I think you can roll with either the Jags against Washington and Josh Johnson.
Oh yeah.
Or
who is Josh Johnson? I'm sorry, I was like 6 years old the last time he started.
If you were 6, that means I was 5.
Yeah. See all this hair and the lack of your hair? That's
Oh no, he took it to the hair.
Son of a something.
Yeah.
The Ravens at home against Tampa Bay at 3,000. I think that they're in play at home against whatever opponent they're playing.
All right, Devin, you got a cheaper defense than those? Those are pricey.
I'm paying up this week.
Okay. Wow. You are. That's new.
Yeah. We talked about how we just don't like that many guys, and Josh Johnson's making his first start since 2011. I mean, that's a long time ago. And the Jaguar. I mean, look, it's a risky play because the Jaguars' defense could totally be giving up. But we've talked about Washington's offensive line issues all season, and I mean, Jacksonville just on talent alone should dominate this matchup. Whether it actually occurs, who knows? But one other, I'll give you a cheap defense, and that's Minnesota. Kind of a must-win game, 3,900 on FanDuel, and they're not that cheap on DraftKings, so it's really a FanDuel-only play. But at 3,900 on FanDuel, it's too cheap.
Yeah, the Ravens are cheap on DraftKings. The Vikings are cheap on FanDuel.
Nice.
Relative. The Ravens are fourth priced on DK and top FanDuel.
Yeah.
There you go. Ryan, any other defenses you want to mention?
Yeah, the aforementioned Atlanta Falcons are under 3,000 on DraftKings, and they're hosting Arizona, who stinks and gives up lots of points to opposing defenses. So I don't mind them. Also, the Bills. We talked last week about how Detroit is allowing a lot of top defensive performances against, and the Bills are hosting them. The Bills tend to perform a lot better at home, which they are.
Those feel like GPP plays. Is that safe to say?
They're teetering.
Teetering. All right.
Yeah, I'm not so convinced I want to buy up at defense this week because there's some other guys in my lineup I don't feel super confident in that $400 could go a long way to making me feel better.
Yeah.
But strictly GPP, I actually don't mind the other side of the Jacksonville game, and the team going against Cody Kessler is always appealing with Washington there. And then this one may get some red flags here, but the New England Patriots are at Pittsburgh. They have a banged up Ben Roethlisberger at quarterback. So I wrote here in my notes, it says upside if Josh Dobbs plays.
Huh.
So there's that for GPP, saving money. Nobody's going to play them. The Steelers have failed in this spot many times against New England, so that might be the reverse homer in me there, John. But
that sounds like a beaten up Steelers fan.
Yeah, but it's a one-dimensional team, right? Without James Conner, this is a one-dimensional team. We've seen Bill Belichick scheme against one-dimensional teams throughout his entire career. So again, it's thin, it's GPP, but it's almost site minimum. So
all right.
Chicago Bears are too cheap. There's too much talent on that defense. I know the matchup's tough, but at home against Green Bay, I like them more than the 8 names that Ryan just mentioned.
I think it was 5.
Shout out to a former colleague who named the entire list, but
it was 4. Oh.
Let's go to stacks. John, you've already sort of teased some of your stacks. Let's have it.
Yeah, I've got 2 no-name stacks this week to share. I'll give the guys the opportunity to steal the mainstream ones, but I like Josh Allen to foster this week.
Ryan just threw his hands up in disgust.
I don't hate it.
Wow, 3 people agreeing.
So Foster broke out last week. He goes up against Mike Ford in coverage. As an undrafted free agent rookie, I'm going to put Devin on the spot, Mr. College Football. Mike Ford, question number one, where did you go to school? Yeah, I didn't expect you to know this, for the record. Southeast Missouri State.
Oh, of course.
And then
the Red Hawks.
Is there another NFL player from Southeast Missouri State?
Probably.
That we would know? I don't know. No. In any event, he's an undrafted free agent rookie out of Southeast Missouri State. Thus far, in limited action in the NFL, he's allowed 19 catches on 20 pass attempts into his coverage. That's a pretty high completion rate. And Josh Allen seems to have a connection with this young kid. I like the pair of them at a fairly cheap price point. The other one I like, the guys were talking about Jeff Driscoll earlier. I was pretty quiet about that. Not a big fan of Driscoll in general, but this week all the pieces are there for him to have a nice week. I like him tag team with John Ross, actually. John Ross is a speedster. He runs a 4.240, and he's going to go up against Darryl Worley. Darryl Worley runs a 4.640. One pass, and it's over. One pass, and he reaches GPP value. So those are the guys I'm looking at. Deep flyers this week. Limited week, not a whole lot of chalk that I like. So on a week like that, I'm going to go completely contrary and look for lightning in a bottle.
Ryan, since your stack was blown up, we're going to talk to Devin next.
I have one more, but Devin can go first.
No, you can go.
Okay, go for it, Ryan.
All right. Well, I did all the work here already, so I want to expand on the Foster stack.
Sure.
I love that John had a different reason than this for it, right? So we're going to have way too many people playing Robert Foster, but Buffalo attempts the highest percentage of deep passes over the last 5 weeks, and Detroit faces the highest percentage of deep passes over the last 5 weeks. And Foster has the highest average depth of target in the NFL since week 10. So a lot of things coming together there. It could mean Josh Allen overthrows him 3 times, but it also could mean that they connect. So that was the reason I wrote that down. But the other one I like, and from a percent roster projection, these names are mainstream, but these roster projections are low, and it's Tom Brady, Julian Edelman, and Rob Gronkowski. You have Brady at under 6%, Edelman at 10%, Gronkowski at 13%, and that stack will cost you just under $19,000 on DraftKings. Again, I said if New England throws 10 passes outside of the numbers in this game, I'll be surprised. And then the last one I wrote down, just a shout out to David Dodds, who kind of coined the term cash plus stack, Andrew Luck and T.Y. Hilton. I think we did not mention Luck. His price is pretty high. So that's why he wasn't mentioned in the cash game section, but on a raw points perspective, I expect these guys to produce.
And if you guys hear us mention, projected ownership or projected roster percentages, we're talking about Steve Buzzard posts his numbers on footballguys.com, and you can check that out on our DFS landing page. Steve,
he updates them. He posts them Wednesday and then updates them every Friday, if not more. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Friday, then Saturday, and sometimes even Sunday mornings based on the inactives. He's pretty on top of it. So definitely check back throughout the week. We're quoting sort of his Wednesday post, but he'll update it like 2 or 3 more times before the week is over. Devin, stacks.
Yeah, my favorite one this week is, it's Brady and Gronk, but I think it'll be pretty popular. I don't think that's really changing anyone's opinion. I'm probably going that route in my 1 or 2 GPP lineups, and then maybe in cash, maybe not. We'll see. The other stack I do like is Derek Carr and Jared Cook, which I mentioned before, and then Kirk Cousins and Stephon Diggs. So nothing new for me. Nothing crazy this week. There's only a handful of situations that I do like. I'm throwing one out there that may be a little under the radar. It's Aaron Rodgers and Randall Cobb. And Randall Cobb had 156 yards or so in their first meeting. And like I mentioned before, Bryce Callahan is out, and they are playing basically a special teams veteran, a guy who really hasn't played a significant amount of snaps at the slot corner position, and is taking over for Bryce Callahan, who's one of the best corners in the league, and that's Sherrick McManus. See what I did there? Nice stall while I looked up the slot corner. But, he's a special teams player. He's one of the best special teams player in the league. But when he was actually playing at the corner position, he was one of, if not the worst corner in football.
Gotcha. Good stacks, guys. Let's move on to parting thoughts. Ryan, we'll come to you first for parting thoughts. What do you think here? You sound like you're not really convinced that the Steelers have a chance this weekend.
Do they ever against New England?
Yeah. Oh, and Ryan's muted, so already
I'm here.
Falling apart.
Yeah, no, okay, I'm already. Hopefully the Steelers don't start the game on mute. No, I don't. But this is like the typical spot where they tend to win, right when fans like myself are giving up on the team. I just wish the opponent were different, because they their number is had by New England, so we'll put it that way.
Right.
I do think it's a good game. I think that the Steelers almost beat them last year, except for that final straw that broke the camel's back on changing the catch rule.
That's right.
But regardless of that, I didn't really have too much else to say other than there's one just super cheap, nobody's heard of him, receiver that I didn't mention that kind of caught my eye last week. If you really if you build a lineup and you have just very little money left, you're kind of watching that average dollars remaining tick down, and you just have one spot, and this is pure GPP, but someone named Trent Sherfield caught 5 passes for 77 yards on 7 targets for Arizona last week. It was the first game Christian Kirk didn't play. John loves it because he somehow mentioned Josh Rosen earlier here.
Right.
Ask me what school he went to. I know this one.
Go do it because I don't.
Vanderbilt.
Okay, perfect. SEC guy. See, even better. That's just my last. I hate that thing where if you have a lineup that you really really love and there's just one spot left and you just cannot figure out that last piece, and instead of just blowing it up and changing everything, plug in Trent Sherfield. He's site minimum on FanDuel, by the way, 4,500.
Nice.
500 extra for Jordy Nelson.
Oh man, Jordy Nelson. We're gonna go to John.
I've spent that 500 elsewhere.
John, what are your parting thoughts?
Is this our 50th show?
I went back and looked, and we actually blew past that because we did the double episodes on Thanksgiving, and we did preseason episodes too. So, sorry, 50th is gone.
I was going to say something about our 50th show, but I don't have.
Yes, it's our 50th show, John.
It's our 53rd episode, everybody, and please tell us in the comments section of the YouTube video. Who's your favorite player that wears number 53? That's my parting thought.
Or 56
I like it.
Or 57, depending on how many we've really.
Next week's Brian Urlacher.
Devin, what is your parting thought?
Yeah, there's really an edge to be had this week. I think that if you do the research, you put in the time, and you don't try to get cute. So we've named a lot of guys, but for me, we actually agreed with a lot of each other this week. So, for FanDuel, I think we all agreed on Brady and Amari Cooper. Don't get cute. I mean, spend up at one of their running backs. Go with Dalvin Cook or Joe Mixon, either one of them. Play Jalen Samuels if you want to. But spending up at wide receiver seems risky. I mean, Julio Jones has Patrick Peterson, Antonio Brown. We talked about him or JuJu going off. Devontae Adams playing the Bears. So I think the consistency in cash is at the running back position this week.
Yeah, I think that's how a lot
and at the tight end and at the defense. Sorry to cut you off.
No, that's fine. I think this is one of those rare times where we'll see Devin pay up at tight end and defense. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hit that little bell next to the subscribe button. Thumbs up this video. Ask us questions in the comments. And visit footballguys.com for our DFS content.
And we'll be back. God, Jordy Nelson catch 6 passes.
And be sure to slam Devin in the comments if you don't like Jordy Nelson. We'll be back next Friday with our Week 16 episode. On behalf of John Lee, Devin Knotts, and Ryan Hester, I'm Austin Lee saying thank you for watching and thanks for being a football guy. To check out our content at footballguys.com, click the button on Devin's face. To subscribe to our YouTube channel, be sure to click on the button on John's face. And if you'd like to see our latest video, click on the giant video in front of Ryan's face. Click any of those now. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening.